No, it looks like you can see me. Now, why am I? There we go. Okay, so sorry, we're sort of working on two different computers here. Um, and I can't see myself on here. That's why. There we go. Now I know what I'm doing. Okay, so everybody, welcome to the BCMA webinar number 6, Marketing for Museums. As you can tell, I have a bit of a cold, so I'm going to try to go through this quick and go straight to Erika, who is actually joining me. She's sitting right next to me at this point. You can see her there. We're sitting in the same room here, so it's going to go easily for technology at least. So yeah, welcome. Forgot to change the number there, but it's actually webinar number 6, Marketing for Museums. This webinar series is presented by the BC Museums Association and the Royal BC Museum and BC Archives. So thank you very much to the Royal BC Museum and Erika. My name is Ben Fast. I'm going to be your facilitator today. I'm the one that's going to be answering technical questions and having any fun things like that. You can feel free to send me a message or an email. My email is there on the screen. You can use the chat function, which we'll get into here. So if you can see me and you can hear me, you're already doing really well. If you can't hear me, try turning on your speakers or using the chat function. The chat function shows up in the little black bar on your webinar. It's that button right there. And when you do use it, please try to use the all panelists and attendees option so that everybody can see your questions. If you only use all panelists, it only goes to me and Erika. And if you have any questions, we'll read them out as we go along. There's also going to be a time for questions at the end as well. So I would like to introduce Erika Stenson. Erika, I have her bio right here, but she can also introduce herself if I get anything wrong. Erika is the head of marketing and business development at the Royal BC Museum. She joined the museum in 2010, so 7 years here already, bringing extensive experience in marketing and business development in both the private and public sectors. She is an alumnus of Harvard Business School, is a communications and advertising accredited professional, and has a liberal arts diploma. So that's a cool mix there. Erika currently serves on the board for Tourism Victoria, and as the head of marketing and business development at the Royal BC Museum, Erika is responsible for building strategic business development initiatives, media relations and corporate communications, publishing, consumer research, and many other related activities. And the BCMA has been very lucky. Erika has been quite involved with us over the years as well. So thank you very much, Erika. And why don't we slide over? I'll let Erika take over here and get going.
Thanks, Ben. So as Ben said, I'm Erika Stenson, and I'm going to take you through a whirlwind tour of some of the key things you should be considering and defining in order to have a successful marketing program. As he said, there'll be time for questions at the end, but I like a conversation. So please, if you have anything as we go along, just send it in and we'll try and answer in real time. Just got a note, our internet connection is unstable. So if we drop out, we will connect back up as soon as we can. But let's get started.
Hold on 1 second there. Yeah, it looks like we're getting a little bit of tech problems. Just press that. So we'll try to get that going as well.
Okay, so to understand and improve your museum's strategic performance, you really need to understand what you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to achieve it. So that's your organizational strategy. And this includes what your anticipated long-term performance is going to be. Are you expecting it to improve or decline? What are your cued levers for driving performance and where there is potential? One of the things, though, that you may want to think about is, sorry, it went too far. What is a strategy? So a lot of people think a plan and a strategy, a tactical plan and a strategy are the same thing, and they're not. Your strategy, the easiest definition that I found that is the smallest number of choices that guide all your other choices. So there's a basic test that you can do to see if it's a strategy or not. And the first one is, it's a guide for decision makers 2 levels down from the executive director or the CEO. And can they take your choices to make their choices? And does the strategy make it clear how those decisions need to be made and when they should not be made? And does it make sure that there are no inconsistencies? So is it easy for them to understand how they can craft their choices? The second thing to consider when you're looking at strategy is the specificity. So if you pick another organization which is intuitively quite different from yours, does your strategy also fit them? Because if it does, it's probably not clear enough or specific enough. And then the third thing is conciseness. So how would the guidance change if you drop some of the elements in it? So if it was no more than 4 or 5 lines, maybe 50 words, can people still understand what it is and remember it? So for the Royal BC Museum, we kind of have 3 strategic lines. And the first is that we take a leadership role in research and scholarship. Second is we develop, preserve, and exhibit world-class collections, and that we deliver innovative programming and partnership. And so those are the 3 things that we kind of focus on as our strategy, and all the decisions need to funnel into that. So choices. The big thing about choices is that you need to make them. You can't just let them happen. And this means you have a commitment to your strategy. It's the toughest part of a successful execution. So you need to think about where you're going to be firm, where you're going to be steadfast, and where you can be more flexible and make some decisions to change and adapt. You need to consider the approach and understand what your trade-offs are going to be. And so when you're looking at choice, the takeaway is don't just let things happen to you. Look at what's happening and make a decision. So your target audience. One of the things here you need to be very clear on as a museum, and one of the things that I find museum people especially have a hard time with is you cannot be all things to all people. So I'm going to repeat that. You cannot be all things to all people. You really need to understand what your customer characteristics are. So you should be focused on the characteristics that are stable and the dimensions that you could control in and that your organization can influence. This is at the core of your competitive advantage, and it's really at the core of making sure that you can be successful, that you're spending your limited resources in the best places, and that you're going to have impact. It is hard to define, and a lot of people, once you start to drill down, have a very difficult time thinking about the audience, but some things to think about. Who are you? If you're thinking about your audience, who are you? You go beyond your demographics. So, women 33 years old, living in blah, blah, blah. But you need to think beyond that. What is important to those people? What do they like to do? Who do they do it with? Where and when do they consume their media? Who do they travel with? Do they like to travel? Okay, just got a note about timing. And then you also think about what need or problem are you solving for them? So one of the things I like to use as an example is summer camps. So summer camps at the museum. When you talk to the learning staff about summer camps, they'll tell you that they're doing them to deliver educational programming to children. And that is absolutely true, but it's not why parents are looking at summer camps. Summer camp solves a daycare issue for them. And so you have to understand what the drivers are. The first one is, I have kids and I need them to be looked after in the summer. Then you look at, what kind of summer camps am I wanting? Do I want educational summer camps? Do I want athletic camps? And you drill down from there. But the primary need or problem that you're solving is that it's a daycare during the summertime season. So you really need to understand what your audience is looking for from you and solve that problem or need for them. The other part is where and when are you talking to them? So is your audience at home watching the news and watching the commercials? Because that's most people PVR nowadays. Or is the mom sitting on the bench at soccer practice looking at her phone, casting the time while she's waiting for little Billy to finish his soccer practice. So you need to understand where and when you're talking to your audience and what's their buy it behavior. So what is their process for making a decision to purchase? So, and how long is that decision-making process? So you narrow down your audience. You should be doing research. You need to understand and take the time to do testing. You need to be able to adjust on the fly. And that takes a while, but once you start with a basic definition, you can narrow it down. The other key thing is you have to understand when you're putting your programs in place, do you have an idea of what success looks like? What are you measuring? Is it ticket sales, revenue, earned media? Is the program free? Is it just purely attendance? Is it the number of dignitaries that come to an event? whatever it is, you need to be very clear what that looks like. And you need to understand what your benchmark is, or if it's a new initiative, understand the purpose of that initiative. Measure what matters to you to that outcome, and be willing to adapt or even cancel if it's not looking good. As you get information and learning from what you're doing, ask the questions: do I need to change my approach? Do I need to be looking at things from a different side? You need to understand what you're measuring and what you think success is before you can do all those things. Performance value analysis. This is really challenging, and especially for new programs, and especially if you're trying to measure financial return on investment along with value added pieces like mandate measures and social outputs when you're developing things. But having said that, you need to be thinking about some things like baseline performance. Where are you starting from? Where do you expect to go from here? And what's your minimum outcome? So if you're selling tickets, and you have 20 spots, is 5 spots the number of tickets where you're going to go ahead? Is it 10 spots? You need to understand what your baseline performance is for moving forward. The other thing you should be thinking about is cost versus value. Those aren't the same things. You have to find a way to run, when you run all your numbers, it isn't the costing, is it costing you more to develop and run the program that you'll actually bring in? And so you need to, or does that matter to you? So when you offer something for free or cheap, you need to understand that you're not putting a value on it, and your customers might not put a value on it. So we've done a number of programs over the years that were free, and we had a huge number of people sign up for it, and then have nobody show up because there wasn't a value attached to it. And at the end of the day, they were tired or they got asked out for dinner or something, so they blew off the program, and attendance was really low. And we do still do some free programming, but we find now that even putting a $5 price tag on something increases the value enough that people will make the commitment and actually come to the event. In order to build programs that your customer values, you need to value the program. And that comes pricing it too low or pricing it too high. So you might want to think about doing pricing elasticity studies. And that is where you know where the sweet spot is, where you're pricing, if it's not too low and it's not too high. If it's too low, sometimes people will consider that it's probably not going to be very good. And obviously if it's priced too high, they just can't afford it. So what is that sweet spot? And if it's lower than what it costs you to do the program, is it worth going forward? So that requires research and an understanding of your audience as well. And then the other part is your competitors. You need to understand what your competitors are doing. You know, are your visitors comparing apples and apples, oranges and oranges? What are they pricing their opportunities as? And how do you fit into that model? A lot of research is involved, but if you want to do things properly, that is the way to go. The other thing about competitors is they might not be, I just thought this is important, they might not be the people you think they are. So they're not going to necessarily be museums and heritage centers. They're going to be whale watchers. They're going to be city tours and zip liners and garden tours. And so you need to really be thinking outside of the box when you're a museum or heritage facility, when you're looking at your competitive analysis. Those people can also be your allies, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you really need to know what they're doing, where they're doing it. Are they chasing the same people as you? And this can give you a sense of where you are in the competitive marketplace. The next big thing is your budget. So what is your budget? How much money do you have for what you're doing? And then out of that, what are your financial performance indicators? So what's important to you when you're looking at your financial performance? Are you looking for significant return on investment? Are you looking to break even? Or does that matter at all because what you're doing is for the social good and you've decided as an organization that's the most important thing? So what are you and how are you forecasting your success? Have you factored in all your costs? So there's materials, but there's also facility space, there's staff time, there's partnership costs, there's marketing. When you're looking at the true cost of developing a program, you should be bringing in percentages of all those things. Now that's a lot of work, and even the Royal BCMA Museum doesn't include everything when we factor out our return on investment statements. But we do still have an idea of overall what it costs. We just don't always apply it when we're looking at things. But you have to make a decision as an organization if that's important to you or not. And then the last part of that is what you're doing a financially viable program? So if it's not, what hard decisions need to be made? Do you want to continue with that program or not? But also, if you're going to be hugely successful, what will the impact be? So way back in my life, I worked on a university account where we were launching some new MBA programs, and we launched a national campaign and crashed their phone system in the first day. And it was, on one hand, a very successful marketing campaign, on the other hand, a very unsuccessful fulfillment. And so in the end, the campaign was a waste of money because they could not capture the volume. And so in today's age, you generally don't push people to phones, but will it impact your web traffic? Should you be thinking about server traffic? Are you driving in attendance all at once? And will your front line or your front of house be overwhelmed? Especially if you're volunteers and you're smaller, you need to be thinking about those things. If you're promoting venue rentals, for example, do you have the staff to fulfill the needs of those rentals? And if not, what are the staffing implications of that? So you need to look at what success might impact, but also what being unsuccessful might impact when you're looking at your budgeting and your forecasting. Then you come to a point where you need to sort of regroup and understand, do you have all the information you need to proceed, or are you just guessing on some things? And what impact could those guesses have on your outcomes? Does the benefit of those guesses outweigh the risk? Sometimes you don't have all the information, and it really depends on where the gaps are. So a gap like not knowing what the potential audience is for a program is pretty big, and maybe not risk going forward without doing some more research. But a gap like, should you put more money into Facebook or Instagram advertising? You can do changes on the fly there. So you might proceed because you can adjust in real time when you're making that investment. So you really need to look at what information is missing and whether you can take the risk to move forward. The next thing is your timeline. So what is your timeline? Timelines and impacts of it can be very substantial, and they can affect people across your organization. So is your timeline realistic? Is it responsive, and have you built in time to make changes? Did you talk to everyone involved? The bigger your organization is, the harder it is to involve everyone in discussions, but it also means that your impact could be even larger. So for example, if you have one person in charge of proofreading and they are working on 8 different things and you forget to consult with them on when you're launching your program and you need them to review your new magazine copy, that could be an impact problem. So you really need to understand how what you're doing and your timelines impact the people around you and what their piece of the puzzle is. And the bigger you are, the more important it is and the harder it is. But the smaller you are only one person or maybe 2 people, you need to understand how much time you actually have to put to each part. Straightforward, but important to remember. One of the things that I think is so important is the devil's advocate piece. So have you challenged your ideas? This is where you bring in that really annoying person who always points out all your mistakes. And this person can be your saving grace. So we all tend to be blinded to the brilliance of our fantastic ideas. And while we all can pick apart top line our own projects, it's really hard for us to delve into what the problems actually are. So bringing in that person and having conversations or even group discussions around, okay, let's take the other side. Where are our gaps? Where are our problems? What could potentially go sideways? by having this third party sort of impartial person come in is really important. And in that discussion, you really should be thinking about your big picture considerations as well. Ensure what you're doing fits with the strategy of your organization and what you're trying to achieve, and what else is going on that could impact what you're doing and when you're launching, and both within your organization but outside your organization as well. This is probably one of the most important pieces of your whole plan, and really, really understanding, you know, what could go wrong and what you're missing going forward. So this is where you think about what needs to change. You've had that conversation and you need to be realistic, be willing to cancel if something really big came out of it that you just didn't think about. But you need to take all that information you received and use it wisely. So one of the biggest challenges is that everybody thinks that marketing is a science, and it's actually more of an art. And so when you aren't successful, they like to point it out very quickly. And in the old days with traditional media, it was very hard to make changes when you've done something that isn't working. Nowadays, we actually have more opportunity to make those changes with online marketing and things like that. We can change in real time. We can make adjustments to everything from our creative strategy right down to where we're putting things in almost a minute by minute scene. But this is where you can take, before you even launch anything, you take that last look and think about what needs to change. Where am I going? Is everything fine? Did we learn anything that will really impact what we're going to go forward with? This isn't necessarily in the order, but partnership is a key part of developing your marketing strategy. So partnerships can help you do a lot of things. They leverage your strengths and your message, and they can really amplify what you're doing. It can expand how much you have, your resource pool. Online and also traditional, and looking at opportunities to package and partner what you're doing. So it's also very important to think outside the box and look for partnerships that might not necessarily seem like they align right away. So maybe it's partnering with a whale watching company or a taxi company or transportation of some sort. Be willing to look for new things and new ways of doing things. And the biggest thing is to recognize that partnerships need to be mutually beneficial. So chances are you're going to think that a company like a whale watcher isn't going to understand the museum business, and you're probably right. But you're also not going to really understand the whale watching business. So when you come together, you need to find common ground to work together. You need to understand that their outcomes from the partnership might not be the same goals as you have. But if they are in alignment and they can work together, that's actually even better, because you're both getting something that you want out of it. But even better if you guys want the same things. Let's do a package and we want to sell as many tickets as we can. Fantastic. But maybe there's other things that layer in, like communications and earned media, or showing some government official that you're partnering together, and that's really good for the community. So just understand what you're going in for and what your partnership means to both you and your partner, and that you're both getting what you need out of it. And then at the end of the day, be willing to talk about it and find places to improve going forward. Your creative strategy, after you've done all this, you get to do the fun stuff, which is thinking about your creative. And the hardest part about thinking about your creative is that chances are you're not your own target audience. And your team is probably not your target audience either. Just because you're bored with the strategy or the creative doesn't speak to you doesn't mean that it's not wrong for your audience. When I started at the museum, almost every single person told me they were really bored of using the woolly mammoth in external marketing. Oh, we have to stop doing that. Everyone's tired of it. Well, when I did some research and looked into it, it turned out that the only people who were actually bored with using the woolly mammoth were people who worked at a museum. Still a huge draw for out-of-province visitors, still a huge draw for school children. So woolly continues to be our face out in the markets, out in the world. And I never get tired of Willie. He's one of my favorite things, but you have to really, the point is you have to understand that just because you live with something day to day doesn't mean that your audience lives with it day to day. The other thing to think about when you're thinking about your creative is don't navel gaze. So you still have to go back to what matters to your audience, not you. Keeping in mind, obviously you got to wrap everything up in your brand, but It goes back to what problem or need are you solving for them? And the creative needs to speak to the audience in a language that they understand. So don't use museum speak unless you're doing something for museum people. And think about when and where your audience are going to receive this creative, how they're receiving it. Is it on their phone? Is it in traditional media? So when you're developing your creative, it's being developed for purpose. And the other thing, especially now in today's world, is that your audience should feel like it's being personalized just for them, that you understand them. It's content creation is about your audience. It's not about you, or you will not be communicating. Creative should feel almost like a mirror to your audience, that you understand them personally, that you're talking directly to them. So really keeping in mind that your creative and your content creation is really about your audience and not so much about what you're doing. And then we kind of move into the tactical implementation. So we're taking the strategy and we're going to roll it into our tactics. And this includes all your pieces. So what paid media mix will do best? How much traditional media versus online marketing? What's your sales strategy? Are you looking at your communications and earned media? Should you do direct marketing? Traditional tactics typically include things like print, so newspaper, magazine, old school broadcast, TV, radio, out of home, billboards, transit shelter advertising, bus backs, outdoor postering, all those kinds of out of home things. Your sales packages, so your brochure distribution, are you using somebody like Certified Folder to get your brochures out in different markets? Are you just at your local info center? How are you distributing those brochures? Your wholesale client programs, so I don't know how many of you have a tourism or travel trade program, but are you working with tour operators and doing direct sales? Are you built into packages for inbounds, so people may be coming in from China and those kinds of places? So what does that sales program look like? And of course, packaging and partnerships. So are you working with hotels? Are you working with a taxi company? How is that working? Are they putting old school tent cards in their rooms? Is there a poster back in the back of the chair in the taxi? So those are the sort of traditional tactics that you need to be considering when you're looking at your overall plan. And of course, direct marketing, which includes old school mail and email as well. And as everyone should remember the castle rules when they're looking at email, making sure that they definitely have all the permissions to speak to the people that they're emailing and they're providing the information that those people want to receive. Obviously, communications is very, very important to any successful marketing plan. So that includes your public relations, your media relations, looking at your earned media values. And that's a whole another topic on how people value that. But you need to consider what's important to you when you're looking at your media stories. Is it that they hit on your key messages? Is it that you were on the front page? Is it that, 1 million people clicked on the story? What's important when you're looking at your earned media values? And how do you leverage social media on top of that? So how does that fit together on those things? And when you're working with the media, you really need to make sure that you're giving them what they need. So it's the facts, making sure that your news release is written so that if they are not terribly proactive, they can just pretty much reprint your news release and you'll get your story. That you've given them a really strong backgrounder with all the background information and the more interesting filler so that they can brief their journalists before they send them out. That you're giving them strong images to fill out the story and understanding what their deadlines are. So if they approach you for an interview, that should be your first question. What's your deadline? So that you make sure that you're getting back to them and can hit their deadline and get that story printed. Social medias is no longer something that we as a nice to have in our museum or anybody's world. Social media is extremely important, imperative actually in your communication strategy. This graphic is actually the US social media stats for this year. It was updated in 2017. And, but we don't have one for Canada. So I'm just sort of going to use one for the US. And so there are so many different ways to attack social media, and most of us don't have the resources to do everything and everything well. Here at the Royal BC Museum, we focus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram just because we don't have time to do a lot of the other things. And primarily we're on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is still the biggest group It skews to boomer though, so, or third agers, depending on what you call that. In Canada, we tend to say boomer. So a lot of our parents are on this, or our grandparents are on Facebook, which are the people who tend to come to museums. Twitter is also huge, growing, continually growing. Twitter, you have to balance the needs of your promotional strategy with obviously the needs of actually providing content that's of interest to people. And that can be a bit of a balance and a bit of learning as you go forward to find the right mix for your engaged audience. But it's a great way to communicate, and it's a great way to sort of keep the conversation going with the people who care about what you're doing. Snapchat is not on here, but Snapchat continues to be something that kids are using, those teens and Gen Zs. But as a museum, we haven't quite figured out how to use it in a productive way. We've looked into Instagram filters and those kinds of things, but they're very, very expensive. It's about $100,000 to work on an Instagram or a Snapchat filter. And so we haven't started using it, but if anyone does have anything there that they are using it and having success, we'd love to hear about it and maybe share your knowledge. And then you really need to make sure that your social media initiatives reflect your strategy and brand well. So making sure that those align with everything that you're doing. I know that for a lot of museums, you don't have the resources to really be on these properties all the time, and unfortunately especially with Twitter, you do need to be responding and being on top of it. But maybe there's a way to bring in a younger set of volunteers to be your champions in social. You have to have very clear guidelines for them on how to interact with your audience and what's okay to do and what's not okay to do. But it is a way to bring in a younger group of people, engage them in what's going on in your museum, and actually get a function that you need taken care of. That kind of brings us into the online, so I'm just checking my time, online and content marketing. So as a museum community, we are way behind commercial ventures in our use of data and online advertising. We could have a whole webinar just on content marketing alone, but here's a bit of a quick overview. We need to understand how our users are coming to us and how they're using the web and the links through social media and other assets, leading to conversion. And so whatever conversion means to you, so whether that's sales or information requests or archive searches or shares or whatever that is for you, you do need to understand where they're coming from. It's imperative for making financially feasible, data-driven decisions. This data could and should lead to investment and decision-making for both marketing spends, but also digital infrastructure and things like people investment, technology, systems, and also what your process is. Over time, the program should be continually innovated and be included with any new website planning. So this is the information that you need if you're going into any sort of technology changes or new websites or any of those kinds of things. This is the content that you want. Your website is your biggest marketing asset, and it needs to be up to date and reflective of your strategy and brand. Nothing puts a potential visitor off faster than a disconnect between what they've been told and what they see, or what they expect to see and then what they see. So you really need to make sure that the process for them is continuous and streamlined. And so you need to understand what you need to know and why, and build a measurement framework for the website and your marketing activities. So understand content consumption and analysis of measures that matter. What are they doing? Why? What do we need to change? Can we be nimble? We have to use that data better for marketing performance frameworks. So what combination of marketing is working between traditional and online, and what does good actually look like? There is a lot of talk these days about going mobile first, especially for anyone who's sort of in our attractions straddling realm. 40% of tourists purchase their tickets and book travel online in North America on their phones. So there is a move to, when you're building your web platforms, to go mobile first and then go backwards to the website. Most of us don't have the financial resources at this point to make a huge move at that point, but if you are going forward and you are planning to do any web work, you may want to think about mobile first and then work backwards to tablet and then desktop. One of the biggest tools is Google track and tagging, and there are different kinds of tags. There's indirect and direct, and indirect means let's say you have a native ad or you even a banner ad or something, and someone sees it but they haven't clicked on it, and then a couple days later they go to your website. If you have an indirect tag, you will be able to tell that that person at some point in their journey came in contact with your advertising and what you're doing. If you have a direct tag, it means that they clicked through, and then you can tag them and you can see what their journey is right through your website, and you know that which ad and which program they saw and how they got there. And you can get a combination because they may have seen your ad 3 times. So you have the indirect tagging information and the direct tagging, and then you know that that's a really good audience for you, and maybe you can use it for remarketing in the future. It's a great way to identify opportunities and be consumer-centric. So in the perfect world, we all have very advanced websites, and our websites will be able to recognize if people have been there before. It'll remember what they looked at, and then you can give them information that will make their journey personalized and what they want for you. And then you can also build out that attribution model for conversion. So where are they coming from? Did they see the native ad? Did they go on our Twitter feed? And how did they get there? So where are all the things that they looked at? So you can see what's working, what people are seeing, and then you can make decisions about where your spends are going to be. And then it'll also give you a chance to understand your content verticals. And so that means, is it people who are looking for learning programs specifically? Are people going through your process and converting, and they're looking for information from your knowledge teams? What is it within your content verticals that's important to your different audiences, and how are they getting there, and what's important? So continuing on that, you need to drill down and think about what data you want to pull and what is important to you. It might not be the same for every museum, so I didn't want to throw out some things there, but depending on what your measures of success are, you're going to be looking at what kind of data is important and how you're going to pull it. This data will then lead you to personalization engines and programmatic platforms so that you don't have to make the decisions yourself. You can buy automatic advertising. So it'll look at your audience profiles, and it'll look at cookie pools, and you can be marketing to people who would have an affinity for what you're trying to sell. And that's really quite important in today's day and age, and it's really the way things are going with big data. Understanding your user journey. So that's before and during their visits to your web assets. So what did they look at before they came to your website? Where did they come from? What's important? What other things fit into their model? This is to understand your visitor. Once they get to your website, what are they doing? Where are you losing them? This can help you make changes to your website so that their journey is easier. You can see where nobody ever goes, and do you need that information up, or is it just that it's named incorrectly for the audience groups? And it can really help you fix the challenges with your websites. The other thing is it can also lead to better SEO. So what words are you using? Where are you going? Where are you advertising? All those things that lead into SEO. This is the information that you need. And the other big piece of online and content marketing, which is the same for traditional, is language. You should be using language that your audiences know and understand, not language that's specific to your organization. I know specifically, I was speaking with a number of groups in tourism, and tourism tends to use a lot of acronyms. Tourism tends to use a lot of really specific regional language, and there's a big move in the last little while to move away from that and really focus on what audiences know about where they're coming, and use that as the doorway in to taking them on an educational route to learn more about the region that they're in. As a museum, we should be looking at things the same way. And then, future code, targeting capabilities, and all those kinds of things that I briefly touched on. If you're doing any Google advertisings or so on YouTube, pre-roll used to be the thing. They have the Google TrueView now, so you can understand how long people are looking at your ads before they click off. And this sort of standard is if they haven't watched 50% of your ad or your promotion during a YouTube pre-roll or intercept, then it doesn't count and you don't pay for it. So there's some new learnings around how you're using YouTube and Google. Most of the Google reps will be more than happy to tell you how to use it, but it really helps with your performance and when you're looking at things, and it also saves you money because you're not paying for people who aren't really interested in your message. And then when it really comes down to what you really need to get away from all of this is what you do matter to your audience and why should they care? And if you can hit on those, you're going to be speaking the right language to them and hitting them with the key messages. And measurement, of course, it's all for naught if you don't have clear goals, you aren't making data-driven decisions, and you aren't willing to make adjustments or hard decisions to cancel. So it should always be a cycle. You monitor, you evaluate, you plan, you measure, you monitor, and you make those changes along the way. And that way you can redo programs, you can do things again and again, and you can really leverage the things that are working for you. And then the final thing, because everybody loves cat videos, do you have any questions? Ben, are there questions?
I'll slide back in here. One comment from Lauren, just that a content marketing webinar would be great. Lauren, if you know anybody who wants to do that, or if Erika, if you want to come back and do that at some point, we do now have a host a webinar form on our website. So feel free to throw that towards somebody and see if they can, they want to take that on. And I will say as well, some people had questions throughout the beginning. I know in the first 10 minutes we had some tech problems, and thankfully they got a little bit better. We will have this recording available, and it's recorded on the computer here, so it should avoid those tech problems at the beginning. I'll put that up on the website as soon as I can get it edited down to the proper length of the webinar. So you'll all get an email from me pretty soon about that. So sorry about that. If you do have any questions, feel free to use the question window, and now they're starting to come in. So Blair asks, I'll move we're using two computers here, so I have your questions on one side. Blair asks, what's your recommendation on affordable market / audience research for a small heritage organization?
So your audience research should actually be specific to what you're trying to do. So the quickest and easiest way to do it is to do a short survey. You know, there's a lot of us who could vet it for you, 10 questions, and just ask everyone who comes through your door to fill it out. And you can ask a few demographic questions, but also some motivator questions like, why do you come visit museums? Is it to see collections? Is it to learn something? Is it just something that you like? What are your motivators for going? You know, who do you go with? Do you go with your children or your grandchildren or your spouse or your partner? Those kinds of questions. Quick 10 questions that can give you a baseline for who your audiences are. We use a company called Event Corp. It's not terribly inexpensive, and it may be something that you can write a grant app for. And they do what we do. It's very in-depth. They put out screens on site, all over the site, and people self-select, and they do the survey. And depending on how they answer the questions, they get different question tracks. We get a lot of information about how much money they spend when they're out and about, and what else they do, and where they come from, and what languages they speak, and all those kinds of things. The nice thing about it is we get a full report with analysis of the data, so we don't have to extrapolate ourselves. I want to say that it's about $10,000, which I know is a huge number, but I also think that there are some grants and other things out there that we could look at that could be sourced to pay for that kind of thing. The other thing is you could speak to other museums of similar size in your region or in the different cities that are close to you, and share information about what you're seeing. And also talk to the people, whether it's volunteers or actually paid staff. Who are they seeing coming in? What kind of characteristics are they noticing? They could even be asking questions like, where are you from? And then just keep a tally of where people are from, just to get a sense of where your visitors are coming from. Those are just a couple of ideas off the top of my head.
And Kelly asks if you have any beginner resources for people that are new to this sort of field to help explain the concepts, the terminology, that sort of thing. Anything that you'd recommend they look at?
This is where Google is your friend. There's a ton of marketing information online, a number of different places. Some places are trying to sell you stuff, but they'll put their top line information, some vernacular. I would say that's probably your best resource. If you're old school, the library has a lot of stuff as well. I don't actually have some beginner stuff, but a few of my staff might have some resources that we could pass along. So I'll make a note and see, and then if I do, I'll send it to Ben, and he can send it out on that.
And we just have time for probably the final two on my list here. So do you have any anecdotal tips that are your go-to? Or maybe you want to answer this one first. Do you recommend marketing to your current demographic or the demographic you wish you had more of?
So I'll answer the second question first. That's a hard question because your current demographic, it's easier to pick the low-lying fruit. So you have to understand, why are you going after another demographic? What's the purpose? So, and is what you're offering going to be of interest to that demographic? So that's not an easy question to answer because you have to know all the other variables. What you should be looking at, though, is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck against your success measures. And then really having a clear understanding of why you're going after that other audience. So one of the things museums always talk about is, we need to get young people in. Let's get the teenagers in, because once they're visitors for life. That is, everyone says that. It doesn't matter. I was in France in June, and every museum there was saying the same thing. That doesn't happen. Kids don't come. Or if they do, they don't want to tell their friends because it's not cool. But if they come as kids, they're going to probably come as young adults, and they're probably going to come with their children. So what you need to do is make sure their experience as children is remarkable so that they come back. That kind of goes beyond your question, but it's really about understanding the purpose for going after that other audience, and then making the decision that are you going to risk your current audience to get that, and is that worth it to your organization? And what was the other one? Anecdotal tips. Oh, there's so many. I think really making sure, here's one. When you're talking to traditional media especially, don't pay rack rate. You go in and make sure you're negotiating with them, make sure that they know that you're probably a not-for-profit or very close, and make sure that they're giving you a better rate. I don't buy media from somebody if they don't at least give me a 3-to-1 value, and you should do that too.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, Erika, for joining us and talking about marketing. We know that we had some problems on this webinar, but I can say that next month we're using a very fancy federal government system because the Canadian Heritage Department is joining us to do a special program on funding for heritage organizations. So we will have access to their multi-$1,000 webinar platform, and everything will go smoothly, I promise you. Famous last words, right? But that registration information is coming soon. I'm going to throw that into the email that I send around after each webinar, which has our follow-up survey, as well as the link to the recording. So I'll throw that information in there as well, because we're actually finalizing the registration on their system later today. So look for that coming soon. And if you could, please fill out the follow-up survey, especially for things like the tech problems that we had. It's really important for us to hear that. Just like Erika talked about measurement, we need to be able to change our programs as well for you. So if you can please do that, that would be a big help to us. And the next webinar, as you can see on the screen there, it's going to be October 17th. So we're back to the third Tuesday of every month for the webinars, and we hope that you'll join us there. Thank you very much again to Erika, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.